This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Dead heat. Good afternoon. Welcome to the broadcast. With 3 weeks to go till Election Day, a new NBC News poll shows the race for the White House could not be closer. Both Vice President Harris and former President Trump each get 48% of the vote, according to the survey. Pollster Steve Kornacki says the post-debate bounce that Harris got in September has disappeared.
We polled this a month ago. She was above water, as they say. That's completely reversed. It now looks very similar to Trump's. That's a pretty big shift when you're talking about a race this close.
10% of voters admit they could still be persuaded to change their vote, with Election Day just 22 days away. Trump and Harris are both holding dueling rallies today in battleground Pennsylvania. Reporter Madeline Rivera.
Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Trump are spending more money in Pennsylvania than any other state. They're set to pour in about $350 million in television ads in the Commonwealth. That is more than double of what they're spending in the next closest state.
Trump's on the stump in the Philly area tonight. Harris is in Erie this evening. A federal probe is underway after an armed man was arrested over the weekend at a security checkpoint during a Trump rally in Coachella, California. Here's reporter Brian Yennis.
Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco admits it's speculation, but he truly believes his sheriffs potentially stopped a third possible assassination attempt against former President Trump.
Still, police say the former president was never in any danger, even though the 49-year-old suspect had a shotgun, handgun, and high-capacity magazine. Correspondent Brooke Singman.
Police say he was driving an unregistered black SUV with a homemade license plate, and he claimed to be a journalist that had VIP access. But when deputies searched his car, they eventually found a shotgun, a loaded handgun, and ammunition. They also found multiple passports and driver's licenses with several different names.
The suspect is from Vegas and says he's an ardent Trump supporter. He was released after being charged with 2 weapons-related misdemeanors. A Hezbollah drone strike has killed 4 Israeli soldiers and injured dozens more. That attack happened today at an Israeli army base in central Israel. Correspondent Nate Foy has the latest from Tel Aviv.
Defense Minister Yoav Gallant visited the army base where those 4 soldiers were killed, all of them very young, 19 years old. This is the deadliest strike launched by Hezbollah since Israel's ground invasion began 2 weeks ago. On top of the 4 killed, 7 soldiers are severely wounded after the direct drone hit. Dozens more have injuries. And again, this happened in central Israel, right near the city of Binyamina.
The U.S. meantime is deploying a THAAD ballistic missile defense system to Israel. THAAD stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. U.S. soldiers will operate that defense system to protect Israel from Iran-backed terrorists. The power is still out for hundreds of thousands in the storm-wrecked southeast after back-to-back hurricanes Milton and Helene. This Floridian sums up the feelings of many in his state.
I've never seen anything like this. Most people living here that are alive have never seen anything like this either.
President Biden traveled to Florida yesterday, where he met with storm survivors and announced the federal government will spend $600 million to make the electric grid more weather resilient. SpaceX successfully launched Starship over the weekend, the most powerful rocket ever built. That rocket was designed to carry astronauts to the moon. Reporter Elise Preston.
Just 7 minutes after liftoff in Boca Chica, Texas, the 232-foot steel rocket flew back where giant metal arms called chopsticks grabbed it. Cheers erupted for this uncrewed fifth test flight. Starship traveled halfway around the world before splashing down in the Indian Ocean, bringing SpaceX closer to developing a fully reusable rapid rocket.
Still to come on the Noon Report for a Monday, PA health scare, New York Trump sign, and how to build bridges, not burn them, when talking politics.
Good afternoon, I'm Kevin Williams. Well, it certainly has been a less than stellar Columbus Day weather-wise, but the good news, if you're not enthralled by the recent chill, at the end of the week it warms up, but until then, it's a little taste of November. Forecast hotels are up in 10.
All right, Kevin, thank you. Let's check the stories making news where you live. The Buffalo Bills battle for first place tonight in the AFC East when they take on division rival the New York Jets. On Monday Night Football, the Bills will be without star defensive tackle Ed Oliver for the second straight week. Wide receiver Khalil Shakir is also questionable tonight. A nationwide whooping cough epidemic is hitting Pennsylvania hard. Family Life's Brian Query reports.
The National Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say whooping cough cases are 4 times higher this year than last year in the United States. In the Keystone State, whooping cough has infected nearly 2,200 Pennsylvanians, outpacing every other state. The total is a 10-fold increase for Pennsylvania. The state health department says immunization rates are high in Pennsylvania and have little to do with this year's outbreak, calling a spike every 2 to 5 years, quote, a normal occurrence. Brian Query, Family Life News.
Williamsville Central School near Buffalo may change its start time for middle and high school students. District officials in Western New York say mental health issues have arisen from students not getting enough sleep at night, and that's why they could move to a later start time for the school day. The Williamsville School Board will consider those changes in December. An Amsterdam, New York businessman has won the right to display a massive 100-foot Vote for Trump sign on the top of his building. That sign is so big it's visible from the New York State Thruway, especially at night when it's all lit up.
We put the sign up. We thought it was going to be a temporary sign, but based on the response, I think we want to keep it up forever now.
That's Anthony Constantino. He is the CEO of Sticker Mule, a custom sticker and T-shirt manufacturer in New York's Capital District. He is the guy responsible for the sign and went to court to keep it.
We had an epic win for free speech. I think the sign's going to become a historic sign, sort of a landmark in a way, because it signifies a fight for the free speech, really. And I think this sign stands for the First Amendment, stands for free speech, and it's going to be a historic sign.
The mayor of Amsterdam says the Vote for Trump sign is a danger to the motoring public because it distracts drivers on the thruway. If you're thinking of traveling for the holidays, you may want to act fast. Travel editor Peter Greenberg.
You have 2 holidays coming up. You have Thanksgiving and you have Christmas. Already, you're a little bit late if you want to book for Thanksgiving. For every day that you wait to book, airfares could go up about 4%.
For Thanksgiving, round-trip flights are currently averaging nearly $300. That's 10% higher than last year. A pro-Kamala Harris group is using video of a 1988 Billy Graham sermon in a new political attack ad. That commercial makes it sound like Graham is preaching against Donald Trump.
Men will become utterly self-centered and greedy for money, but their lives deny the truth.
The Billy Graham Evangelistic Association is threatening legal action if evangelicals for Harris do not pull this ad. The pro-Harris group says it will continue airing the ad, even with that copyrighted Billy Graham video. Next at noon today, a conversation on how to bridge the political divide in this country with a closely contested presidential election just around the corner. This election has not just divided friends and neighbors, it's also pitted family members against each other. Family Life's Greg Gillespie talks with Christian counselor Dr. Joni DeBrito at Focus on the Family. Here's some of their conversation.
You have to start by looking at some boundaries and knowing who you can likely have a civil conversation with and who you can't trust to remain civil. So regardless of who it is, you can gently refrain from engaging with people who seem to be more interested in picking a fight than engaging in a meaningful dialogue with you. You can just say, you're called as a Christian to be at peace with others, and simply state that you aren't interested in debating. You'll be voting, but you're not interested in debating. And then on the other hand, if you know people who you've experienced to be genuinely interested in discussing issues of concern in a respectful way, first of all, listen to what they have to say. And that means really listen. Don't be planning how you're going to disagree or agree with them, but really listen, reflecting back on what they've said or asking some questions, and point out the places where you're in agreement. That would be a good place to start.
Is this thing of political debates or the inability to talk with family members or coworkers or friends, are you seeing that in a counseling setting?
Absolutely. We see increases in those kinds of issues whenever there is an election year. Our culture is, I think, a little bit more politically stimulated than usual for many, many different reasons. Some of their emotion about politics is maybe venting about things that they've lost or difficulties they've had at that time. But again, we live in a world where social media is so prolific and so many people spend hours and hours on social media that they're getting encouraged to ramp up and have arguments with friends and coworkers and so forth. And those things tend to bring about a lot of stress for a lot of people.
The social media, we don't have to look face to face at people, and all I have to do is send something off. I don't deal with the immediate consequences of hurting the relationship. Can you recap for us the 1 or 2 or 3 steps that will help people navigate this strange time we're in?
Sure. I think it is really listening and asking questions, and I also think clarifying your beliefs. And when you talk about your beliefs, relate them to your values as a Christian rather than tied to a current cultural practice or movement. But I'm so glad that you picked up on that idea of social media. People are spending too much time on social media these days, and there are all kinds of negative effects of being on social media too much. And certainly one of the things that we know is that it increases people's level of anxiety and depression, and also keeps us from communicating face-to-face. So that would be the other thing that I would say is, by all means, if you are going to have a discussion about politics or any other area of disagreement, try to have that conversation face-to-face with someone, because there is so much room for misunderstanding if you're not communicating face-to-face and you're just communicating via text or whatever. And it's very hard to tell if someone's being serious or sarcastic or what have you. And so that face-to-face communication is so important.
Good stuff right there. Dr. Joni DeBrito, a Christian counselor at Focus on the Family, speaking with our own Greg Gillespie. Greg's full conversation is available online. Just go to familylife.org and look for the news tab on our podcast page. Sports news next. We call it the 2-minute drill on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, a busy day in sports yesterday with football, the baseball playoffs, and NASCAR. Let's start in the NFL. In Vegas, the Steelers defense forced 3 turnovers and walked away from the Raiders in the second half, outscoring them 20-6. They won the game 32-13. The Giants had a home date with the Bengals and could not handle Joe Burrow. Burrow threw for 207 yards, but it was his legs that did the G-men in. He rushed for a 47-yard touchdown, and the Bengals won it 17-7. The Eagles had their hands full against the Cleveland Browns, but Philadelphia managed to win the back-and-forth affair 20-16. Game 1 of the National League Championship Series was all Los Angeles as the Dodgers spanked the Mets 9-0. Jack Flaherty tossed 7 scoreless innings, allowed only 2 hits. Mookie Betts drove in 3 for the Dodgers, who tied a postseason record with 33 consecutive scoreless innings. Game 2 tonight. The ALCS starts tonight as well. The Yankees will be hosting Cleveland. Also in action tonight, we're back to football for a moment. The Buffalo Bills They will play the Jets in the Meadowlands. Let's talk NASCAR. Kyle Larson is through to the next round of the Cup Series following a win at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Christopher Bell, William Byron, Austin Cindric, and Chase Elliott rounded out the top 5. However, Cindric, along with Joey Logano, Daniel Suarez, and Chase Briscoe, were eliminated from the playoffs. The round of 8 kicks off next weekend. That is a look at sports.
Thank you very much, Randy. And still to come on the Noon Report for a Monday, how Prop 1 could impact public schools in New York, why NASA's studying a moon 2 billion miles from Earth, and with 3 weeks to go, it's even Steven in the race for the White House.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Snowstreet. Late last month, Virginia teacher Peter Vlaming won an important legal battle against the high school that fired him. It was back in 2018 when the well-liked French teacher was placed on administrative leave by West Point High School. The reason? He failed to comply with the school district's policy concerning preferred pronouns. Though Vlaming was willing to accommodate a request by a female student to use her chosen male name, he refused to refer to the student with the pronouns he or him. Now, to be clear, Vlaming did not use female pronouns either. He chose to avoid using any pronouns when referring to the student. But the school superintendent told Vlaming that he could not avoid using the male pronouns, even when the student wasn't even present. Vlaming refused these demands and within a few short weeks was fired. In other words, Vlaming was fired for what he did not say, or as Alliance Defending Freedom Senior Counsel Tyson Langhofer put it, what he couldn't say in good conscience. Vlaming filed a lawsuit against the school in 2019. A lower court threw it out, but in 2023, the Supreme Court of Virginia reinstated the lawsuit, stating this, quote, absent a truly compelling reason for doing so, no government committed to these principles of free speech and freedom of religion can lawfully coerce its citizens into pledging verbal allegiance to ideological views that violate their sincerely held religious beliefs, end quote. Well, on September 30th of this year, the West Point School Board decided to settle the case, agreed to pay Vlaming over $500,000 in damages and attorney fees, and also cleared the firing from his employment record. Now, Vlaming is one of a growing number of educators who have been fired for refusing to comply with pronoun policies, or in some cases, dissenting from gender ideology in their research. While some have been vindicated, like Vlaming, others are still waiting for the courts to rule in their favor. In other cases involving schools, parents have learned in horror that their children were being transitioned with the help of school administrators and personnel without their knowledge and permission. Now, contrary to what proponents claim, policies that support the social transition of children are not kind. They're not aimed at what's best for the kids. These are policies that enable and protect practices that cause irreversible harms. This includes policies about pronouns. You see, even a single pronoun matters because language matters. Our language should match reality, not distort it. Now, that's true for everyone everywhere, but especially for those who teach our children. Educators should not lie about reality, and the state certainly should not force them to lie. It may seem insignificant, but using a pronoun that does not correspond to a person's sex denies the truth of reality, that every person is made in God's image as male or female. In other words, to use the wrong pronoun is to tell a lie. To require the wrong pronoun is an additional lie. And lies beget more lies. All forms of so-called social transitioning pave the way for chemical or even surgical transitioning, all of which wreak devastating results. And that's why the loving thing to do is to speak the truth, even when it comes to something as simple as a pronoun. And if you would like to learn more about why so-called preferred pronoun policies are unloving because they are untruthful, check out a free What Would You Say video resource entitled, Should I Use Preferred Pronouns? You can find it at whatwouldyousay.org. That's whatwouldyousay.org. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
All right, John, thank you very much. Outside next, Kevin Williams.
Here is your Family Life weather forecast. The call for today, cloudy and chilly as we head through the afternoon. Rain will be tapering in central New York and the Finger Lakes, a couple of showers. Elsewhere, a few scattered showers across higher elevations of western New York. Wet snowflakes as temperatures hold primarily in the 40s, dropping into the 30s tonight. Rather cloudy with a rain or snow shower tomorrow and Wednesday. Plenty of clouds, a few scattered showers, and again, some wet flakes will be mixed in over higher elevations. High temperatures both days in the 40s to near 50 degrees.
All right, Kevin, thank you very much. This is the Noon Report on Family Life. I'm your host, Bob Price, and here's what's happening. Monday, October 14th, an armed Vegas man arrested over the weekend at a Donald Trump rally in Coachella, California. Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco says after two previous attempts on the former president's life, they weren't taking any chances.
In regard to previous attempts on the former president's life, this was not something that we were taking lightly, and we know that we prevented something bad from happening.
The 49-year-old suspect had a shotgun, a handgun, and a high-capacity magazine. He was driving an unlicensed vehicle and had several fake IDs. With Election Day just 3 weeks away, a new report shows a record number of us are worried about our finances. Cheryl Casoni at Fox Business.
Many Americans are struggling for basic necessities. Think food, think gasoline. 55% of middle-income households have a negative view of their personal finances. Many of them are concerned about their credit card debt.
Both Vice President Harris and former President Trump will hone in on the economy today during dueling rallies in Pennsylvania. More on that from reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns in Philadelphia.
The Harris campaign is releasing a series of economic proposals specifically for black men. Harris will be campaigning at a rally in Erie, Pennsylvania today, and former President Trump will be right here for a town hall outside of Philadelphia for a town hall that his campaign says will be focused on inflation and the economy.
A just released NBC News poll shows the race for the White House could not be closer. Both Harris and Trump get 48% of the vote. 10% of voters admit they could change their mind between now and Election Day about whom they will support in the race for the White House. The Biden administration sending more troops and a missile defense system to Israel. It comes after 4 Israeli soldiers were killed in a Hezbollah drone strike on a military base in central Israel. Parts of western Florida are dealing with devastating damage from back-to-back hurricanes Helene and Milton. Reporter Tom Hansen is in Treasure Island, just west of Tampa.
Along the Gulf Coast, debris, uprooted trees, and foundations where entire homes once stood. Robin Maggio got a first look at her home after Hurricanes Helene and Milton hit.
This is horrible. I literally am speechless right now.
President Biden flew over St. Pete Beach. He spoke with storm victims and promised $612 million in additional federal aid.
We're going to do everything we can to get power back in your homes to help you build back stronger.
Those in hard-hit Valrico need the help. Floodwaters have swallowed entire neighborhoods.
That's Tom Hansen reporting from Treasure Island, Florida. There's a nationwide shortage of IV fluids because of Hurricanes Milton and Helene. Reporter Michael Toscano has more on that.
The solutions made to rehydrate patients are produced at a plant in North Carolina that's been shut down for now because of the ravages of Helene.
Many hospitals are being forced to delay non-urgent surgeries.
Dr. Celine Gounder, editor-at-large for KFF Health News. The FDA made the official declaration so hospital pharmacies have the flexibility to prepare their own IV solutions and providers know how to ration their supply. And Dr. Gounder says an important lesson wasn't learned.
Why didn't we learn from the pandemic the need for greater redundancy in our medical supply chains?
That's Michael Toscana reporting. You're listening to the Noon Report, a Monday edition on Family Life. Welcome back to another edition of Issues in Education. Mondays during the Noon Report, we spotlight the issues impacting our schools with Dr. Ralph Kerr at the Teaching and Learning Institute in Houghton, New York. Did I say that right, Ralph? Is it Houghton, Houghton? How do I say that?
No, Houghton is perfect. Absolutely.
I jest there. Proud former Highlander myself.
There you go.
And absolutely miss the school and the people there. Ralph, we'll talk about an issue that is well known to many in education, and that is the teacher shortage problem. Officials are estimating in New York alone, they're going to need 180,000 new teachers over the next decade. I read a statistic like that, Ralph, and I also read that student enrollment is down. So I'm wondering about that teacher shortage. Is it that big of a problem?
Well, it's a problem right now in terms of shortage. Districts are being asked to provide a lot more services for students than in the past. Most districts are looking for counselors, social workers, language teachers, foreign language teachers particularly. Even though there are less students, those requirements are coming on districts, and it's just more and more difficult.
Yeah, you mentioned the need for teachers who specialize in English as a second language, special education, foreign language, bilingual education. Just the past couple of years have been a wave of migrant children enrolled in public schools. Some 300,000 non-U.S. citizens have entered New York State in just the past couple of years, and many of them have children, and now those children are in the public school system. This was a huge story a couple of years ago, Ralph, and last year. Is it still a big issue in public education as far as you can tell?
Well, it's getting bigger all the time, depending on how many people you think actually have come into the country illegally. 20 million, 12 million, who knows how many really. In the cities, they're having huge problems trying to find bilingual teachers who can help with that. And I can tell you that in the rural areas across the southern tier of New York and the northern tier of Pennsylvania, it's just absolutely impossible to find bilingual teachers who will come to the area.
Yeah, and with that language barrier, I mean, you thought it was tough to be a teacher before. It's a lot of times they don't even understand because of the language barrier. It's just a huge problem now, and not an inexpensive problem either. It's costing a lot of money to educate these children. Well, earlier this month, Ralph, this is one of your favorite topics. Pennsylvania representative, we had mentioned this last year. The bill has been introduced in the Pennsylvania State Assembly. Democrat Scott Conklin, we're calling it a Fairness in High School Sports Act. I don't know if that's the name of it, but that's the gist of it. I don't know if it requires or just incentivizes the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association to separate private and public schools when it comes to post-season competition. If you got a kid playing high school sports in Pennsylvania, I bet you're paying attention to this story. Ralph, this legislation, do you support it or not, and how come?
I certainly do support it. I mean, over the years, while I was working, and even since then, I continue to see situations where private schools are able to recruit students, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you average not only recruiting the students, but recruiting student athletes, that's where it really takes on an unfair circumstance for the public school system. Obviously, if you are in the public school system, you have to be a resident of the district. Although, honestly, even there, we have some cases where people move to a district and maybe take an apartment or whatever so that they can establish residency. But that's unusual in many cases. But certainly in the private school system, they can recruit anybody to be a student there. And it's sort of ironic that very often some of the students that they recruit just happen to be really good athletes.
Yeah, isn't that how it works?
So when it gets down to the playoffs, it's just a totally unlevel playing field or court, whatever sport you're in. Yeah. And certainly it needs to be looked at, and I'm glad that Representative Conklin has introduced that bill in Pennsylvania.
I miss the days when I was in high school. We won sectionals my senior year in basketball, soccer, and baseball, and the starting center was picked up on the same bus route as the forward, the guard, and the point guard. They all were in the same district. restricted. I think that's the way it should be. Some years you're up, some years you're down. And then finally, Ralph, Prop 1 on the ballot in New York. They're calling it the Equal Rights Amendment, but those who know say it has nothing to do with that. Critics argue if this proposal is approved, that it would compel educators, guidance counselors, school nurses, school administrators, you name it, to keep parents in the dark when it comes to sexual orientation issues. What are your concerns as you look at Proposal 1 in New York and how it might impact public schools?
Well, first of all, let me say that a lot of the stuff like you just mentioned is not in the bill, and that's the problem. The bill is really vague and unclear, and that's basically the problem, because what happens in any bill that's vague and unclear, then it's left to the court system to determine what the bill really means, and that's not the way the legislative process ought to work. It could well be that parental rights are going to be negatively impacted. You may remember Nancy Pelosi once said, we have to pass the bill in order to find out what's in it. Well, in this case, if this proposition is approved, and I recommend that people vote a hard no on this particular proposition, if it is approved, it's going to end up in the court system, and while it's processing through the court system, it's going to wreak havoc in the state. So vote no on Proposition 1.
All right, that'll have to be the last word. If you're concerned about fairness in sports, as we mentioned earlier, you don't think biological boys should be playing girls' sports? Well, there's another reason to say no to Prop 1. If you have questions about any of the topics discussed this week on Issues in Education, Ralph, you have a wonderful website where you encourage Christians to get involved in their public schools. If you would, what is that, sir?
That's simply whyrun.org, whyrun.org.
All right, Dr. Kerr, thank you very much. Issues in Education airs Mondays during the Noon Report. You can also catch it online at familylife.org. Look for the news tab on our podcast page.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. On the midday weather map, we're tracking an area of low pressure moving across our region. It is accompanied by ample moisture, and the result has been cloudy skies, rain, even some wet flakes over higher elevations. As that system departs, it leaves behind chilly air for the next couple days and nights. Warming comes our way at the end of the week. The call for today, cloudy and chilly as we head through the afternoon. Rain will be tapering in central New York and the Finger Lakes, a couple of showers. Elsewhere, a few scattered showers across higher elevations of western New York. Some wet snowflakes as temperatures hold primarily in the 40s, dropping into the 30s tonight. Rather cloudy with a rain or snow shower tomorrow and Wednesday. Plenty of clouds, a few scattered showers, and again, some wet flakes will be mixed in over higher elevations. High temperatures both days in the 40s to near 50 degrees.
All right, Kevin, great work as always at the Weather Center. Finally, from us at noon today, NASA is launching a mission to learn more about a mystery moon at the center of our Milky Way galaxy. How about that? Correspondent Rory O'Neill fills us in from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
The Europa Clipper will study one of Jupiter's moons, Europa, roughly the same size as our moon. Europa is covered in ice, but has a liquid ocean underneath that's more than twice the size of our oceans.
Ocean worlds like Europa are not only unique because they might be habitable, but they might be habitable today.
NASA's Gina DiBraccio says this mission isn't looking for life exactly, but is investigating the habitat. Clipper is setting off on a 1.8 billion mile journey with its first close flyby of Europa in the spring of 2031. I'm Rory O'Neill.
All right, Rory, thank you very much. And that's our world, folks, the world we live in. Monday, Columbus Day, October 14th. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.